genomic sample and you just count chromosomes. And if there is an abnormality, if there are too many of a certain type of, let's say chromosome 13, then hey, there is a high risk of trisomy 13. But what you don't do is you don't actually do the sequencing of the fetus's DNA. And that is something that people are working on, but is not there yet. And once this is going to be mature, I think that is going to be a big booster in that market, which is a huge, huge market across the world. So that is one driver for the high end. Another very, very big market is the liquid biopsy. So there is a lot of hype on liquid biopsy and, cell-free DNA, etc. Now, whether this is going to end up as hype or real is a big question. But obviously, if you're able to displace or even partially displace the need for complete physical biopsies, there is a huge market out there, and a lot of companies, including Illumina with Grail now, are being active there, and it can be huge. And then the third, I think, market that can be a big driver for the high end is what I call preventive or general purpose sequencing. And basically what you see today is that there are governments that want to create repositories of genomic data for their whole populations, so that they can have large population studies and correlate them to the development of diseases. It's also a matter of national pride, and also to optimize the deployment of financial resources to know better which drugs will be more effective for specific patients based on their genomic profile. So I would say that on the high end, that's really what's driving the market today. It's very difficult for me to tell you what's going to be driving the market tomorrow, right? There is a lot of research happening in a lot of these areas. Now, let's go to the low end. Okay, so on the complete low end, it's a big question. What I can tell you is, I went and visited researchers and customers, and they had shelf space, and they told me, hey, this shelf space is going to be for, in that case, it was Genapsys. Genapsys is a company in Redwood City, and they claim that they're building a CMOS sequencer, very low and low cost. Okay, so there's a huge amount of enthusiasm and desire for the low end sequencers, and that would be for example, microbiome, to look at bacteria and viruses, to look in the clinic, to look at infectious diseases in emergency rooms, etc. Okay, so that's the low end, and the mid range. There are some specific applications. For example, forensic sequencing is one of them. There are also companion diagnostics. That's another very big driver that is actually driven by the drug companies. And basically what that is, if you have a drug that will only work on effectively on a sample of the population, and you're able to sequence the patient before taking the drug, then the insurance companies are much more likely to fund that drug. So I think Illumina is very, very active, but everyone is, in developing companion diagnostic platforms and protocols with specific drugs.
Okay. And so let me put it this way. We talked a lot about Illumina, and that is, of course, it's your background, and it's a big player. From your perspective, what could really jeopardize Illumina going forward? What are some of the key threats to that player? Yeah,
I think Illumina is so although they are currently still a monopoly, I think they're actually quite vulnerable. So although I spoke a lot about Illumina, it's mainly because today they're the main player, but actually there are a lot of threats to Illumina today. So I think that the main two threats, I would say, are from a workflow perspective and from a CapEx perspective. Okay, and let me try to explain this. So we went through only very briefly. We only touched on the